Hey everyone, how you doing? So, the current year is 2025. The world's kinda burning right now, but hey, at least we have gaming to distract from that. Yay! The reason why I mentioned our calendar year is because Fortnite has been around for nearly a full decade now, which is still shocking to me to this day. This game really stuck it out through hard times, and there's been so many additions to it over the years that it could be taught in a classroom setting with relative ease. With that being said, during that long history with this game's existence, we've gotten a slew of interesting and unique weapons to work with, many of which deserving their own videos in the future, I'm sure. But in my eyes, one weapon stands out above the rest as far more interesting, and that'll be our topic for today's video. That weapon is the charged shotgun. And simply put, if you can't secure kills with this thing, it's not the gun's problem, it's yours. It's a skill issue. So join me as we discuss the history of, and how to properly use, the charged shotgun in Fortnite Battle Royale. Let's get right into it, starting with the year is 2020. The world was burning back then too, but for slightly different reasons than now. Back in the day, Fortnite was a very different game. We didn't have any of these fancy LEGO worlds or borderline AI-generated creative maps, nah. You know what we had back then? A creative hub that was made by a different person or team every week. Oh, the nostalgia hits hard for me. But I digress, we're already getting off topic. This was a game that simply wasn't as developed or seasoned as it is nowadays, and therefore, Epic was much more prone to making some interesting choices. In particular, Season 2 of Chapter 2 was a very good season, widely regarded as the best season the game has ever seen. So what did Epic do once it was over? Water. Yep. So, Chapter 2 Season 3 flooded the entire Fortnite map. And as a result of that, presumably, the survivors had to get all Noah's Ark on things and preserve what they wanted to save the most. Then they also decided to make new weaponry. Huh, okay. This is where the charged shotgun finally introduces itself. But before we get to that, let's talk about shotguns in Fortnite during Chapter 2. Back in the day, they did a significantly higher amount of damage, the pump in particular being especially powerful. In this era, the epic and legendary rarities of the gun could hit 200 plus damage, more than enough to secure a kill on anyone. Of course, nowadays we have 0 builds, so no shotgun can truly one-shot in this age, but we're not looking at that for this video. We're just looking at builds. And in builds, yeah, one-shots are still not really a thing for the most part. So with that added context, let's go back to the charge. This shotgun begins its journey with update version 13.0, which is, well, the first day of Season 3's launch, its introduction season. Okay, simple enough. And since this was its debut update, I think it's only appropriate that we discuss the initial stats of the gun just to get everyone caught up to speed on what it was like in this time period. All main rarities of the weapon had only 3 ammo, with the damage of the uncharged weapon dealing 80, 85, 89, 93, and 98 damage with all pellets connecting. The full charge was a bit stronger, dealing 120, 127, 133, 139, and 147, and that's without counting headshots. Oh boy, back in the day when the headshot multiplier was ridiculously strong. I miss those days. The headshot damage was really striking back then, dealing 180, 191, 200, 209, and 220 damage. Yeah, the 200 damage threshold was crossed with the blue charge. Sounds broken, right? Well, the weapon on its launch was a bit slower than it is now, and it also had no visual indicator for being at its full charge besides the little meter on the side. It's small differences for sure, but these added up and made the weapon have a significant learning curve for anyone who was serious about playing Fortnite back then. With that being said, I intentionally left something out of that basic rundown that was introduced right alongside the base charged shotgun, which is Kit's charged shotgun. Like all other mythics at the time, this gun was a unique weapon that was only obtainable by eliminating the boss Kit at a POI called Caddy Corner. The gun itself was very strong in its launch even for a charge. The max uncharged damage was 102, the max charge damage with no headshot was 153, and the headshot charge damage? 229. Oh, and this gun was especially unique in that time period because it had 5 ammo. Oh my god. Even in today's loophole, this thing is a real behemoth, and it's no wonder why when you're looking at it from a retrospective lens. But never mind that. That's basically the first update for the charge covered, and from here on out, the changes get a little interesting. For the first few weeks of its introduction season, the charge saw no changes, until it received a pretty solid buff in update version 13.20. The biggest change to note here is the reload time across all rarities of the charge being reduced, with an average reduction of 0.5 to 0.7 seconds. It may not sound like much until you look at the common charge's reload time, 5.5 seconds before the reduction. Yeah, so one of the biggest complaints about the charge back in the day was the reload time. It just took too long for a shotgun of its caliber. So Epic reducing the time across the board made this weapon a lot better in the long run. That wasn't the only buff in this update though. Two more small changes were made, one of these being the addition of 1 extra ammo for the epic and legendary charges. This, again, may not seem like much, but another major complaint about the initial shotgun was the lack of ammo for it. 3 ammo for any weapon isn't much to work with, and that's especially true for a shotgun that somewhat mirrors the pump. This change was a very positive one at the time, and on top of this, they added a charge bar above the weapon reticle. This bar lets you see exactly how long you've been holding your charge, which is a generally nice quality of life addition. I mean, if you're trying to hold your charge, you can imagine how convenient it is to actually see what range of damage you're going to be getting when you fire. So overall, this was a very good update for the weapon. That marks the last of the changes from Season 3, and now we're moving on to Season 4. Nothing too crazy happened in this one, we only saw 3 notable changes. In update version 14.0, the kit's charged shotgun was vaulted, so rest in peace. But we also got the option to side grade the charge into a pump shotgun with a crafting bench, if you even remember those. Cool stuff, but overall not worth discussing much here. What is worth discussing is a charge abruptly getting vaulted in update version 14.40, which happened near the tail end of the season. Not sure why, but alright, sure. That lax attitude comes from what happened next, in update version 15.0, where it was unvaulted and got a net buff? Huh? Okay, so every charge got a base damage buff, every charge but the mythic got 1 extra ammo, the reload time for the rarities was decreased by a few milliseconds, and the common charge was vaulted. Okay, that last one was reverted, but still. Even in the later seasons of Chapter 2, it seems like Epic wasn't satisfied with the general sentiment on the charge, so they decided to buff it again, even the mythic for some reason. I'm not quite sure where this kindness came from, but it ended up making the charge a very good weapon for the rest of the chapter. Then it got vaulted in update version 16.0. Unfortunate, but it's happened to many weapons before. And in Season 8, right before Chapter 3, it got unvaulted in update version 18.0, then promptly thrown in as one of the craftable weapons because, yes, Chapter 2 was still holding on to that weapon crafting idea. And for the final update in its introductory chapter, it could be crafted from a combat shotgun. This first chapter was a lot to take in, but there's still more to cover somewhat. In Chapter 3, exactly 2 updates affected the charge. The first, and less surprising of the two, was update version 19.0, also known as the first season of Chapter 3, which vaulted the gun. Rest in peace, find your eternal slumber pleasant. Then in the following season, specifically update version 20.30, Epic's reworking of shotgun damage came into full swing. This was the time when the infamous pump lost its 200 damage threshold, a change that's still in the game to this day. So, the charge actually got a pretty major nerf, with all rarities losing several points of base and charge damage. Now, this change comes with a headshot multiplier increase, but the damage was capped, to the point where the legendary and mythic charges could hit up to 195 damage. Oh, what a rough chapter for the gun. Then Chapter 4 came along, and in the second season, specifically update version 24.10, a reality augment called Go for Broke single-handedly reintroduced the charge into the loot pool, even if it was only the epic one. But that single weapon inspired Epic to buff the whole thing because, whoa. The damage caps for every rarity got increased overnight, including the headshot damage casually being set to 200 and above for every rarity past rare? Huh? These changes stem from one rarity of one weapon coming back, and every single charge got buffed. Okay, wow. In update version 25.0, the charge was then vaulted again, since the augment was removed from the game, but in update version 26.0, the mythic charge was unvaulted. So, charge fans were eating good this chapter. Nothing else huge happened with the charge after the crazy buffs. The most that occurred was update version 32.11, which was a little into chapter 2's remix season, bringing back the charge and introducing a new version of the mythic that tagged enemies when it hit them. Okay, sure. Then the weapons were all vaulted on the launch of Chapter 6, Rest in Peace. So that's the long history of the charged shotgun, at least in Battle Royale. You don't necessarily need to understand a lot of the context to understand this weapon, but I felt like a proper history lesson would be helpful for some people out there, since now we're gonna delve into a much more hands-on topic, that being the charged shotgun is good once you are good. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. The title of this video isn't just clickbait, it's my genuine thoughts, and I truly believe you should use this weapon and learn it before you throw criticism my way. Above all else, the charge rewards having patience, and in this section, I'm gonna try my best to explain what I mean by that. So let's start simple, and we'll begin with how the weapon works, because even understanding that can help you use it way more efficiently. The charge, unlike almost every other weapon in Fortnite, is not tap to fire. This isn't your Garda variety pump, or your infiltrator pump, or your hammer pump. Okay, admittedly there's not too much shotgun variety, but the charge stands out in this regard anyways, as it focuses on, well, charging. You may notice it when you pick the gun up, but pressing the fire button once will fire it with a small delay, and this damage is typically pretty mediocre. You could maybe get away with using the shotgun like a regular pump as a legendary or mythic, but the lower rarities would feel no different than a Maven auto shotgun with a heavy delay. And believe me, you don't want to feel like a Maven ever. Where the charge begins to shine is with the actual charging. Instead of pressing the fire button, if you hold it down, you'll see a bar at the top of your reticle go up. This bar indicates the charge level of the gun, and the higher it goes, the more damage you do. It's simple to understand, but complex to learn, because a charge level means two completely different things depending on what you hit. If you're aiming for the body, the entire charge meter matters, as the damage slowly increments the more you charge your gun. At no charge, it hits like a wet noodle, but at full charge, it typically hits much harder, with the middle charge levels doing varyingly decent amounts of damage. Where this charge level disparity is most obvious is with the mythic charge, which already hits 106 damage on the body with no charge at all. When you get to the maximum charge level, it gets much more powerful, a solid 156. It's pretty damn useful to know just how much damage you're gonna do with any gun in general, and when it's as consistent as the charge, it only gets better. Even at longer ranges, the charge is still extremely predictable, but we'll get there when we get there. When it comes to headshot damage, this is where the charging itself doesn't matter as much. Unlike body shot damage, headshot damage hits its maximum potential at about 50% of the charge meter, so you can use this to your advantage and easily hit an insanely powerful shot on an enemy without even really trying. At least, assuming you play your cards right. This is possibly the most overlooked part of the charge as a weapon, which genuinely disappoints me so much because it's easily one of its strongest aspects. The charging itself doesn't actually matter as much as you think it does, and even if it does matter, it's still a delay of half a second at most to get the damage you want. I want to discuss that in further detail in just a bit, but let's first go back to something I mentioned before, which is the range of the gun. Yeah, the charge has really solid range damage too. As if it wasn't already good at a lot of what it could do, it also somewhat works as a ranged shotgun if you charge it up enough. The higher rarities can actually still one-shot opponents 2 tiles away, and they still hit very hard up to 4 tiles away. Of course, the drop-off starts really kicking in by the 6th tile, but that's to be expected, since most shotguns lose the ability to even hit someone by that point. Even if you have to charge the gun to get the most out of it, you're still able to use it at longer ranges surprisingly well. And that's helpful because... yeah, let's discuss the elephant in the room. No, not that one. Shoo. I mean the charging gimmick as a whole. Okay, so in a game like Fortnite, where the difference of 0 ping and 40 ping quite literally means life and death, especially in build fights, you can imagine how a shotgun like the charge has its downsides. And let's face it, the charge gimmick forces the user into a much slower playstyle, no matter how you slice it. Whether you're trying to push into an opponent's box, or you're trying to defend against someone doing the same to you, you're gonna have to play a little differently than you would normally. The reason why is pretty simple. The longer you charge your gun, the more time you're spending waiting for your opponent to make a move on you. It's really nothing complex, but it changes the way you approach this weapon quite a lot in active combat. Sure, in most situations, and for most players, they're barely gonna register the difference between no delay and half a second, especially in public matches. But when you start climbing the competitive ladder, you'll inevitably see situations where using a charge can be an active hindrance, especially against someone who's extremely aggressive. Simply put, the charge requires the user to think fast, and to understand that you can't take any other action while you're charging. On top of this, the charge has another not so nice quality about it that I haven't mentioned yet. Let's take a look at the in-game audio for this one. Wow, that's pretty loud, isn't it? As you charge up the gun, a hissing noise begins to play for as long as the charge is held. This may not seem like a big deal, but let me put you in a situation to make it fully clear how much of an issue it could be. Imagine you're fighting someone who has a charge, and you hear them box up and hold their charge. They're expecting you to make a move, and the hiss makes it especially clear. So what do? Well, you'll probably pressure them and break multiple walls, making them misfire and then take them out easily. Now, not everyone would consider that choice in that situation, but I think you get the general idea on how the charge could be seen as a double-edged sword. When you have one, it's very clear to most players. But with those points being made, I think you can also begin to understand how complex this weapon really is. It goes far beyond being a charging shotgun, as some people put it. There's a lot of nuance to the playstyles it encourages, and the players who learn how to use it best tend to do a damn good job with handling it, since it's basically a necessity to learn the weapon properly. My personal favorite way to use the gun is to get a big shot in on someone while they're pressuring me, then finish them off with a pistol or SMG. It may sound a little scummy to use another weapon with a shotgun, but it's really the best way to go in today's meta. You're not going to find many players who swear by just a shotgun as their main weapon, so take advantage of your options. Another way to use this shotgun effectively is to poke at people from longer ranges and build fights. Nowadays, a lot of players might cover themselves while they try to build up, but with a shotgun like the Charge, you can actually bide your time on high ground and find a weakness in your opponent's building to take advantage of. It's a great perk of having a charging weapon, since you can analyze your opponents while building up your damage. Two birds with one stone, I say. And of course, when a zero ping warrior tries breaking into your box, you can always just hold your charge for half a second and instantly get free damage on them. These are simple tips, but they really end up making a difference in the long run. You'll likely find yourself in lots of weird positions when you use this gun, but luckily the charge is flexible enough to basically bend in your favor for almost any fight. Even the cockiest of players can get humbled very easily by one good charge shot. After all, it's still one-shots. You yourself shouldn't get cocky while using a gun though. That's a recipe for disaster if I've ever seen one. Over-reliance on the gun can put you into positions where you have no other choice but to hope and pray that your shot connects before your opponent's does. And that's not really ideal for this gun. So always be careful, but also don't be afraid to take risks where and when possible. And as a last little note for this section, while most of these tips apply to the build mode of the game, there's a good amount that translates well into zero builds too. One particular extra tip that works in both modes is holding your charge while you rotate. If you use something like a grappler or a shockwave to move through the zone, hold your charge in your hand while you're in the air and see if you can spot anyone moving. You can basically get a free shot in without having to worry so much about being an obvious charge user. And this applies beyond zone rotation. Really, movement items and a charge go hand in hand. They work together really well. I mean, heck, Kit dropped 2 mythics in Chapter 2 Season 3, the other one being the shockwave launcher. Yeah, it's not really subtle how Epic wants you to use the gun. With all of this being said, there's still one more topic I want to graze over with this gun, that being this might seem like an odd direction to take for the video, but I truly want to cover everything I can about this gun, and if we're going in that direction, we'll need to discuss how flexible the charge really is in just about every setting. As you might know, Epic's given Fortnite quite a lot of metas, for better or for worse. I remember some of these somewhat positively, like the really strong balancing of Chapter 2 Season 4, a time period where the charge, the tack, and the pump all lived in harmony. Then I think about the infamous spray and pray meta that tends to hit the game sometimes, which isn't so fun. And then, my mind drifts to the Primal Season. Ugh. One day, I'm gonna give that season its own video. It's genuinely gross. Now, what's my point with bringing up these metas? Well, most metas of the game have their own strengths and weaknesses with the weapons in them. The easiest to explain directly is the spray and pray meta that we occasionally get, which typically consists of weapons that break builds and pump a lot of bullets into your enemies easily. The meta in particular that I remember pretty well is Chapter 1 Season 5's, which introduced a higher tier SMG that, at one point, had 50 ammo in its magazine. This, combined with the loophole that especially excelled at close range, made spraying at your opponents a lot more viable and effective. And that talking point leads us to how the charge can handle these various metas. Since the weapon itself is much more effective as a defensive tool, you can pretty easily counter the spray meta using some common sense. I mean, all you have to do is charge your gun and hit your opponent once at higher rarities to get an instant kill, while your opponent has to dump their mag onto your face when they get close to you. Yeah, you're in a good position with this situation, and most other metas in the game can generally be countered by a good charge shot. And with that, I think I can safely give a conclusion on my thoughts about this weapon. Overall, the charge shotgun is an absolute behemoth. To call it a good weapon would be one of the biggest understatements in the world, and I'm putting that lightly. It's incredible in so many ways, from its good damage, to its range, to even the mind games you can play with your opponent. It's versatile, strong, and just a really solid gun to pick up, honestly. So if you haven't already, please try out the charge. You might regret it at first, but you should try learning it to get better with it. And when you do, let me know. I'm happy to watch other people enjoy a weapon the same way I do, it just brings me so much joy. Thank you all so much for watching until the end, I really do appreciate it. I understand how weird it must be to see me posting Fortnite as frequently as I have been, but I assure you, it's for a good reason. I like the game. Okay, so maybe it's not for an amazing reason, but still. Also, while I was making this video, we hit 100,000 subscribers. Whoa. I made a video talking about my thoughts on that already, but if you haven't seen it and just want my short thoughts, ooh, thank you guys so much. Sincerely, I'm still in shock about it, and seeing my channel with this amount of people supporting it is unreal. I'm gonna try my best to continue making content that lives up to y'all's expectations, so stay tuned. And finally, I have to of course thank my extra Wi-Fi channel members, and this month we have a lot. So, going in order from the oldest members to the newest, thank you to Song, Danby, Wapfa, Nicholas Vankowski, Eric Hero, Envious, Jolty, You Should Buy a Mori on Steam, Smash Kid 15, Monster Puffs, Garfield Fan, Lord 09910, Brady Knudsen, Ari, Logan Steele, Pixel Von Doom, Logan Ellis, Bulldozer 1121, Shelmo, Muti Red, Rifinator 9, Billy, Wacky Edits, Xenox, Pixel PD 2936, Nappa, IMP, Joe Ghost 346, Jonathan Lennox, Just Better, Purple Flower, Abstract Cannon Bicycle, Absolute Cineva, Sal Likes Pizza, Jax the Bot 7829, Nacho Guy, Dumbass Died Here, Keith, Marcin Wyliz, I think, Jet, King of Lames, Max Rico Quinn, King Kurtstein, Toast, Mixed Colors Bunny Z, Spam Ting Gold, Moldy Butterstick, Fampi, Ori Avani, I think, Eclipsey, and Tricky. Lots of members. But thank you all regardless. And alongside my normal YSI members, you all rock. Sincerely. Thank you for your continued support. Now, as for me here, I've recently been getting back into Destiny 2. I'm gonna hopefully play that, if I have time. So I'll see y'all in my next video. Peace. Wait! Oh my gosh, red light, green light.
Should we do it?